Welcome to Elevating the Vibes, a podcast dedicated to shining a light on the incredible people making a real difference in their communities. My name is Tom Marshall, and I'll be your guide on this journey of positivity. Let's face it, negativity can be overwhelming these days. Negativity seems to be on everyone's doorstep. And wearing all these hats personally as a husband, father of four, family man, business professional, board member, coach, and all-around community guy, I see it constantly. But here's the bright side. Life throws those curveballs, but the amazing people who pick you up after make all the difference. This podcast isn't just about feeling good. It's about celebrating the perseverance and grit of everyday heroes. We will be diving deep into the stories of these change makers, uncovering their passions, their approaches, and the positive ripples they create. Settle in and get inspired by some remarkable folks, proving good vibes conquer all, even in tough times. Let's elevate together and let the vibe shine through. We are back with another segment of Elevating the Vibes. Elevating the Vibes showcases the good in people and the journey our guests go on to impact others. The vibes are grooving here today in beautiful Bethany Beach, Delaware. Today, I'm honored to sit down with someone I respect so much and means so much to me personally, Meghan Rodgers. Meg is the president of the National Collegiate Cancer Foundation. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, buddy.
Meg, as a board member for nearly 2 decades, I've witnessed the incredible journey of the NCCF, alongside with my fellow board members and also, of course, Dan's family. And let me tell you, the longevity coming up on 20 years of NCCF would not have been possible without your leadership. Meg, there's so many stories, right? Moments of joy, challenges, and everything in between. I'm sitting here with sunglasses inside. It might get a little emotional today. But today we're going to delve into some of those stories. And I'm sure there'll be some laughs, some tears, and we'll enjoy the journey. But before we embark, let's rewind to the very beginning. But before that, let's set the stage with our guest. Where are you from? And it's summertime. How do you like to spend your summer?
Yeah, so born and raised in Rockville, Maryland. So shout out to the DMV. And yeah, I'm kind of doing what I love to do in the summer, which is a couple weeks at the beach, just hanging out with family and friends, spending time by the water. So glad you could make the trip over from Easton to be here.
Thank you for letting me crash your vacation. Meg, NCCF's coming up on 20 years. I can't believe it. And can you take a walk back in time here and share for the folks some of the inspiration behind the NCCF and what the mission is behind the foundation?
Yeah, so the acronym NCCF stands for the National Collegiate Cancer Foundation. I know it's a mouthful. And our mission is really to provide young adult cancer survivors with financial assistance as they attend college, graduate school, trade school, as well as support them and their family and friends in maintaining a will-win attitude as they deal with the impact of cancer in their life. So I can't take credit for NCCF, but, really that was the vision of Dan Waeger, who started the foundation. And then obviously it's why we're here together. He was our mutual friend. And Dan started the organization, based on his own experience. He was in graduate school at Wagner College studying to get his MBA, training for a half marathon, the San Diego half marathon. When just sort of, gradually over the course of a couple of weeks, he noticed that he was getting short of breath. It was harder for him to walk up the stairs, and, he kind of gutted it out and finished his final exams and went home and went right to the emergency room, and they ran a bunch of tests, and, at 22 years old, heard the words that, nobody wants to hear, which is, you have cancer. And originally his diagnosis was undetermined. So when that happens, the diagnosis is actually something called cancer of an unknown primary. which we'll talk about in a little bit, but that is why the name of our annual fundraiser is the Waeger Cup. So CUP is a nod to Dan's original cancer diagnosis that ultimately was changed to stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer within a year or two. And so, shortly thereafter, like I said, Dan was a college athlete. He played golf at McDaniel College. He was a college coach at Wagner. And he, I think, always felt very lucky and blessed to have such a great family and friends and support and, even financial assistance. But I think he quickly realized that, back at that time, there weren't a lot of organizations helping young adults with cancer. And there certainly weren't many providing financial assistance. So with his friend, Mike Caprioletti, launched the first Waeger Cup, I guess, within 6 months of his diagnosis. And, that was really how the National Collegiate Cancer Foundation, NCCF, was born, was really out of his experience, his attitude, his point of view, but also desire to just give back to others, other young adults in his situation, to both be an inspiration, but also, like I said, provide financial assistance. So that's where it all started from, was Dan's story. And then, the Waeger Cup, which ultimately over time became NCCF.
Meg, thank you for sharing the background, and we're going to unpack a lot of that. And let's circle back with the NCCF first before we go down memory lane here with Dan, which will probably be a little bit of a therapy session for you and I. But NCCF, how many students have been impacted through scholarship winners, and what are some of the mechanics that the scholarship applicants have to go through? And then follow-up question on the NCCF side, how are those scholarships reviewed?
Yeah, so before I address that, I just, a few things I think it's important for people to understand is there's roughly 90,000 young adults ages 15 through 39 that are diagnosed annually with cancer. It's the number one cause of death within that demographic. And, it's not just, the financial implications of when they're actually going through active treatment, but, the cost of treatment for a young adult, I think, ranges around $850,000 of an impact in their life. So it's incredibly expensive endeavor. So that was why NCCF was originally founded. We have an annual process where we obviously have our scholarship program open between March and May of each year. We accept applications, and then those are reviewed by a committee. And I'll talk a little bit about how cool the committee is in a second. We actually have 2 programs. One is our survivor program. So that's for young adults who have been diagnosed themselves. And then also, through the generosity of the Steinow family, we have our legacy program, which goes to support young adults who have lost a parent to cancer. The mechanics of the scholarship programs are relatively the same. There is an application. We do ask for academic records and achievements. But the whole goal of both applications is really to celebrate the survivors and have them tell us their story in their own words. In fact, one of the questions that we ask is about, having a winning attitude. We ask for recommendations, very typical to a scholarship process, but those recommendations for us are generally from people in the applicant's life that have been impacted by their story. So, we're not, we recognize that, dealing with cancer in and of itself, like, we would love to be able to help every single person that applies. But, we're not looking for, the person with straight A's or, the most credentials on their resume. We really want to understand how cancer has impacted their life. And I think that goes back to, Dan, who was always very vocal about, his story and experience. So, it's a relatively, easy process. And then from there, the scholarships are reviewed by a committee. And I just bring that up because I think it's one of the coolest things about our organization is, hey, it's very difficult, like I said, to have to, read these applications and make some assessment, right, of who should get an award. But all of our readers are, our family and friends of either, Dan or myself that have been doing this for a very long time. I think one thing that's really cool to me is that there's now a generational aspect of this. Dan's nieces and nephews also now read scholarship applications. So it's also just a really nice way to keep his legacy alive. But yeah, and ultimately we give out $1,000 awards. We've been doing roughly about 75 annually now for the past couple of years. We'd love it to be much more money, but I think that it's always been very important to us to be able to help as many people as possible, even if those dollars are small. And I think it's also just been really amazing to see how those awards, the people that do receive them, one, appreciate the opportunity to tell their story, but two, man, I've seen people pay it forward in some really cool ways. So,
yeah, I know Dan shared with the scholarship and the winners. We can't relate so much to having cancer because you and I, fortunately, knock on wood, haven't had. But Dan was sharing that when you do and you're battling, you're looking for a win. Mm-hmm. And for these scholarships, that is a win. Mm-hmm. And I know it was also important to Dan for these folks who do win the scholarship. It doesn't necessarily have to go towards academics. I know we had the opportunity to meet a recipient in New York City and had coffee with this individual. And he shared that $1,000 helped him get a car, to be able to get a job, to be able to go to work and help pay off some of these medical bills. So I really loved that part about Dan, of just helping others find wins during their most challenging times. And he was the visionary behind, all of this and making it happen, all while he was battling his own battle,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good old Dan Waeger.
I know.
Waeger will win.
That's right. Meg, you shared some staggering statistics about kind of young adults. And while the numbers are absolutely staggering, I think it's also important to share some inspiring numbers of the financial dollar amounts within the past 19 years. I know we're looking to have our best year yet. Could you share kind of ballpark how much money has been raised through these grassroots efforts in the past 19 years? Yeah.
So with this year's scholarship cycle, we will have raised and awarded over $800,000, which, again, is a combination of the core event that we do each year, the Waeger Cup, the Steinow family that funds the Legacy Foundation. And then, over the years, there have been wonderful, organizations, quote unquote, well, actually, I wouldn't call them organizations, just friends and family of people that have been impacted by cancer. Our friends from Icing Lymphoma, Tom, those guys that come and play at the golf tournament every year.
Yep.
Raise money in honor of their son, Curtis McIntyre, who lost his battle to cancer. And then a huge shout out to the Carrico family in Ohio that have, I guess this is their third annual tournament that they've done in memory of their son, Kevin Carrico, who was actually an NCCF scholarship winner. So, we're, it's great to be able to say that we've raised $800,000. But I think it was actually Marge Carrico that said to me last year, it's just like, but it's also really horrible, right? That that there continues to be this need, and it's even, with the rising cost of education, like just, even more important now. But we're very proud. As you said, it's grassroots. Nobody's employed. This is, it's all volunteer organization. And, that's also very unusual. I think when people, lose somebody, very rarely does it sustain itself. These types of events and organizations sustain themselves for, more than a couple years after that person is gone.
Yeah, it's amazing just to kind of reflect back on the impact over the years of that Waeger Nation has had, and the impact that Dan has had. And I think it's truly remarkable that some of these other folks have their own fundraisers to donate back to the NCCF. Yeah. I mean, that, you want to talk about making an impact, holy smokes.
I think it's one of the things that makes me most proud. There's a human element to this. Obviously, these are parents who reach out for assistance for their kids. Their kids, young adults, sorry, I don't want to call them kids, but, kids who are actively going through treatment and, all the way up into grad school. So, yeah, I mean, I think just the community that has been built that obviously started with Dan, but has paid itself forward in so many ways by just people, becoming connected to the organization, to me is just, it's candidly one of the reasons why I keep doing it every year.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on that. I'm gonna get the tissues ready here, so that's let's transition to Dan. And as we celebrate Dan's impact of the NCCF, it's hard to ignore the bittersweet truth. And this foundation exists because of a need we all wish never existed. But the vision for the NCCF came from a truly remarkable man, Mr. Dan Waeger. The story for me is...
Don't make me cry.
I know, right?
I'm usually the one that always cries. I've really held it together. You've seen me at every golf tournament be like, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
Why do you think I have sunglasses on right now?
Yeah. I was talking to my friend who recently lost her father, and maybe a year ago, when they were getting ready to have his celebration of life, I was like, it was the actor Andrew Garfield, the guy who played Spider-Man on Colbert, that has this great clip. And Colbert's interviewing him, and Andrew Garfield, gets emotional and starts crying. And so, Colbert sort of like, is apologizing for the fact that Andrew Garfield has now become emotional. And Andrew Garfield's response was, what all grief is unexpressed love. Mm-hmm. So, to me, it's like, it's always, it's emotional, but I think it's, happy tears as well.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, I rocked the green band all day, every day for the past, I don't even know, 20 some years. And, for me being here in Bethany, I got the call from Dan when I was 22. I just graduated college and was living in Fenwick, so 10 minutes down the road. And it was like a Tuesday night. And I was like, I just don't feel like going out tonight. And got a call from Dan, and I was like, what's up, man? How are you doing? And he was, we called up for a little bit. He's like, you got a minute to kind of actually talk for real? I was like, yeah, absolutely. And he was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I have stage 4 cancer. And at this point, they didn't know it was lung cancer. And I was like, well, that's the good one, right? And he was like, no. He was like, it is not the good one. But I was 22. I was naive. I wasn't well-versed.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but I could just see this conversation in my head. Like,
yeah. No, it's... It took me back, and it's a kind of full circle year. And I remember after that phone call, a couple weeks later, Dan and all the college buddies came down and to Fenwick, and I was serving a bull on the beach, and they all came in and had a great time. And I think he ended up having to pay the bill. They did draw the credit card out of a hat, and he was like,
man, the cancer card didn't even get him out of paying a bill.
No, the boys made him man up and pay there. And despite his diagnosis, the man was full of life. He battled cancer with incredible courage, a spirit that never dimmed at all. And even at his lowest point, this is what to me stands out about Dan Waeger. Even at his lowest point, and while he was sitting at Johns Hopkins around nurses and family and friends, and we would go with him. We'd be sitting at his bedside. While we were there concerned about him, Dan was watching everybody else, and he saw that most people did not have anybody there with them. Or if they did, it'd be one person, where Dan has like 15 people around him, and we're hanging with the nurses. And, for us, it was an opportunity to see Dan and kind of lift his spirits. But for him, he recognized that not everybody has the support system. Not everyone has great healthcare insurance. Not everyone has the financial resources. And to have that vision while he's sitting in that bed getting chemo and radiation is just truly, I get chills just thinking about, him making that impact. And then we'll get into it in a little bit. Like, he knew what the end result was going to be, but he was like, this is going to be my legacy. And this is why we do what we do. And this is why we're doing this podcast, to shed some light on Dan's story. And a big part of Dan's story, which we'll get to, is your story and how you have been able to rise up and build your own relationships and make a huge difference in the cancer community. Meg, speaking of kind of getting started here with Dan's story, can we go down memory lane a little bit? And can you tell us how the two of you met and what struck you most about Dan from the very beginning?
Yeah, I haven't thought about it. So I think one of the things that was remarkable about Dan was, he had a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. But at least by the time I met him, which was a couple years into his journey, you just wouldn't know. Like, there's no way him standing in front of you
would
like
have no
physically, emotionally, like temperament, that not only did he have cancer, but stage 4 cancer. So I think one of those things was, emblematic is Dan just kept living his life. He would go out and have a few beers with his friends. And we actually met having beers, but after, flag football, at Caddy's Bar in Bethesda, shout out to Caddy's. So yeah, we just met, after a game, and, I don't know, I think from the get-go, we were kind of giving each other crap about something. And then, Dan was a little overserved, left his keys at the bar. And I was like, oh, I'll take the guy's keys. Like, yeah. And kind of Googled him and found him. And ironically, like, he ended up literally in downtown Silver Spring. Literally our offices were like facing one another.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we went to dinner, like gave him back his keys and played Frisbee. And like, that was it. I think we were engaged, within like 9 or 10 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, there was, he was, he had a lot of swag, like a lot of swagger. I don't know where he got it, but like he was just definitely one, a joyous individual, regardless through any of all of this. And like, and I think, what was always so great about him is he just made everybody else in life feel so good about themselves. Like he never made his cancer diagnosis like about him, other than, being able to share his story to inspire others. But yeah, he was a real gem. That's for sure.
He was. And even, back then, and I think it's awesome. You're a St. Patty's Day baby and Dan, a little Irishman. You guys meet over some beers and it just seems like a great fit there. But, back in college, Dan he had these sayings that would just resonate with you. And you're like, how, looking back, like he was so ahead of his time. And I'll share a story here. His senior year, group of us lived together, BZ, Lowy, Dan and I, and Weaver and Fagola. And we're sitting there watching the CMT Country Countdown, and Dan has a night class, and we're sitting there drinking some Natty Lights. Dan comes down in a full suit, tie, everything, hair slicked. And we were just ragging. I know, right? Just ragging on him. We're like, what are you doing? Why are you in a suit? And he was like, boys, let me tell you one thing. He's like, I'm giving a speech tonight. And he said, if you ever want people to take you seriously, you need to suit up when you speak. 21 years later, like that still resonates with me on a random Thursday night from college. And it's so true. Yeah. So true.
Yeah. We should probably list out all the Waegerisms.
Yeah.
Obviously the one that stands out to me is, life is, which is not his, but, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
Yeah.
Which I just think, one, is kind of the mantra of our organization. But if I think of any one thing, that's what I think of when I think to Dan, is just, this attitude and positive outlook. And it's not to say we didn't have tough conversations. That's for sure. Yeah. But, we would limit that to a certain amount of time. But yeah, that life is 10%. It's still, I can still think about it today. Like in anything I'm going through, so.
Yeah, it's become, really a life motto for myself. In my professional role, I speak to all of our new employees, and I talk about my grandmother, my uncle, and Dan, and that's the quote I have across the top, because life's not easy, right? And we're all going to get knocked down, and you got to keep on moving. And Dan did that to a T while he was battling his own fight. And Meg, I know you were by his side through all the ups and downs. You spent the most time with him, what made him so steadfast in his commitment to the NCCF and the golf tournament when he was battling his own fight at the same time?
Yeah, I don't think many people could do it. I mean, his attitude, having seen him speak so many times, what he would say is, I was going to be thinking about cancer every day. Regardless, sometimes good, but that's all I was going to think about. And I think while he always had a winning attitude, the reality of being diagnosed ultimately with stage 4 lung cancer and the statistics, he always viewed himself as the outlier, right? That he would outlive the prognosis. But I have to imagine that he was very aware of what the reality was, from that perspective. So, I think really for him, it wasn't that he, just founded NCCF. I mean, he had a job as a development manager for the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. So his job every day was, being around and, contributing back to the cancer community in a broader way than just our organization. And so I think just for him, it was really, hey, if I'm going to sit and have to think about something every day, I might as well just do something about it. Again, I don't think most people would have that reaction. But that was, I think, just very much, part of his core and what really, motivated him every day. And I, obviously now, hindsight, 20 years later or 15 years later since he passed, I think it was also, he took a lot of strength from the other survivors, particularly at NCCS, his boss, a woman named Ellen Stovall, just the people that he worked with every day. Who had survived tough things. They had done tough things. And so I think he just found a lot of resilience and inspiration and just surrounding himself, one, at work every day with people, but then two, just helping other people, like himself. I mean, when Dan was diagnosed at 22, there wasn't a lot of other 22-year-olds that he could look around and be like, oh, this is, I've got a built-in community as good as his friends and family, were to him. And so I think that was the other thing was his, it gave him, I think, also a sense of community as much as he was doing good for others. I think he took a lot of strength and inspiration from the organizations that he was involved in.
And one thing I'll share about Dan is he never went through the motions to just check the boxes. He was fully invested in, his career, in his relationships, and his personal friends, and even the golf tournament. It was so important for him, for folks who came out and took time away from their day, to your point of making people feel special. He wanted everyone to leave that golf tournament with something. Do you remember, those raffle years?
Oh my God. What Tom is referring to is my obsessive need. I eventually filled a storage space of Under Armour golf shirts and, and everybody we would literally call out 200 raffle items and would have this big, setup. So, I mean, that was probably one of the positive things that came out of our COVID year of having the golf tournament was I put that, to rest. We still give out a lot of good stuff, but hundreds of raffle items where people were just sitting and waiting to call their number. But yeah, I mean, I think particularly with the golf tournament, I don't golf, although I am taking lessons this summer.
All right.
So I might hit a few balls.
You'll fit right in with our crew then.
Yeah, exactly. You know where I'm coming with that fucking fireball. I know
no
exactly.
Doubt.
Yeah. But he always, so when it came to Waeger Cup, I think one of the big things is Dan always wanted it to be accessible. Mm-hmm. So it, obviously there's college golfers out there, mm-hmm. but there's, people like you,
hating on my golf game here.
And he always gave out the participation trophy, trophy for last place,
the
toilet bowl. So, he just, he never wanted Waeger Cup to be like a corporate event.
Right.
And he, if it was just, 20 years from now, 10 of us sitting around and playing golf and that was the Waeger Cup, I think he would be happy that there's still 10 people out there, thinking of him and committed to the mission.
Well, even going back before cancer in college. I remember it was Christmas. We were all getting ready for break. And they had a store, Stephen Barry's, over in the Cranberry Mall. And I'm not kidding you. We walked into the living room and there were like 30 winter jackets there. And Stephen Barry's had all types of colleges. And we're like, Dan, who do you know at Colorado State and Winnipeg? And, and he's like, my brother's best friend's cousin has a friend who goes there. And I saw the jacket, so I picked him one up. And we're like, so you're just buying random jackets? He's like, who doesn't want a jacket from Wichita State? But he had that spark in him to just make others feel
a very generous spirit. Yeah, that's
absolutely.
For sure. That's for sure.
Meg, while Dan created this incredible foundation and it really started to thrive, things kind of took a turn for Dan and the cancer spread. And there became a point where the end was nearing. And I know Dan met with a handful of his closest friends. And I know Lowy and I made the trip down and we knew. And he told us, I have two things I want you guys to do. Keep the foundation going, which we could do. And then he wanted us to run a marathon, which we could not do.
Tom, we could have 26 drinks today and call it a day.
And yes, let's do that. But I know there's so many people, and the significance of the marathon was he was training for a marathon when he was diagnosed with the San Diego Marathon. And he was like, I just want you guys to know, I don't want you to know what cancer is, but I want you to put your mind towards something that you can beat. And I know you guys aren't runners, but I want you to do a marathon. So what we did was we did the Baltimore Marathon, where four of us would do the relay. And then the one year, my wife Amy actually ran the marathon. So Matt and Aaron Wolf and Lowy and I, we each ran a segment with Amy. So we kind of checked that box. But I know that there's a number of other folks within Waeger Nation that do run marathons and have ran it specifically for him. And then, Meg, the end, just awful in its own right. But then to compound that with what was supposed to be during that week, I'm hoping you might be able to share just the gravity of losing your fiancé.
Yeah, I mean, so it's always like interesting when I tell people, like for example, I referred to Dan's sister, sisters and brother as my brother and sister-in-law, right? People are like, wait, what? You only have one brother? So, I've had to, explain that situation, obviously, but yeah, I mean, the reality is, on face, when I share the details of sort of the timing of this, it's very tragic. I mean, Dan died the day before my birthday, and I think 4 or 5 days before we were supposed to get married. We'd canceled the wedding, obviously, months before. So, yeah, I mean, but also great things, like Dan's nephew Jack was born the day before. So there's always been, I think, pros and cons to the situation. I guess again, having the ability to look back now, my comment on my personal situation is, when somebody is sick in a prolonged illness, you start grieving the life that you had when that person can no longer live it.
Okay.
So, they call it anticipatory grief, right? So me as Dan's caretaker, eventually there was a day that he couldn't go outside anymore, and so there were these little losses along the way that I don't think you really, realize the cumulative effect or maybe mask it in your mind. But yeah, I mean, obviously I think people that have gone through similar things, when that person ultimately passes away, you're just happy that they're not suffering. And I remember I had a hard time understanding what this meant at the time, but I did go to therapy. Probably should have stayed in a lot longer at the beginning, but a therapist said, I said, I have this biggest worry that like helping Dan through the end of his life is going to be the best thing that I ever did. And the therapist looked at me and was like, well, you might be right. And I remember in the moment, because I was younger then, like how crazy that felt to me. But now, all these years later, I'm like, hell yeah. Like, you know, to be able to care for somebody, I mean, you know, it is the ultimate honor, you know, to be able to help them leave the world in the way that they desire. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds really horrible, maybe weird to say, but I'm very proud of myself and very proud of him, and how both of us navigated, you know, those last months, because it was just he and I. I mean, he was in hospice, but you were at our apartment. We lived in this teeny tiny little apartment. You know, we were lucky that we had some family members, you know, come in and out, but day in and day out, it was he and I. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely bittersweet, you know, there's always, you know, anniversaries, like, you know, and it's always, you know, tough. And, you know, now when it rolls around, some years I'm like, yeah, March 16th is just like no other day.
Right.
And other years it can be soul crushing, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, with that perspective. I mean, I will say, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but, you know, that little nerd, like, from day one, like, and to this day, he sends me flowers every year on my birthday.
Wow.
So again, at times that was a little awkward, particularly in romantic relationships, you know, like what, but I just appreciate it so much that, like, his point of view for me was, I always want to let you know, you know, how much you're thought about and cared about. So,
you know, think about the podcast, kind of come full circle here, elevating the vibes. And Meg, with you just sharing your story, there wouldn't be a human alive if you said, you know what, I've been through a lot. I love the foundation. You guys can take it and run with it, and whatever it turns into, you know, Godspeed, best of luck. But that's just not who you are. And, you know, your strength and dedication and honoring Dan and his wishes. And then I've seen you, and it's not easy, right? I mean, it's emotional. I mean, you know, we're humans at the end of the day. You forged and built your own relationship within the foundation. You've connected with people. So, you know, the folks in Ohio and doing other fundraisers, like, that's all you. And I just admire you so much for being able to push forward. And, you know, let's be honest, there are some days where I'm sure just putting one foot in front of the other was hard, and potentially still hard, you know? Where the hell did you get your strength, and how did you push forward, just given what you just shared?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I am human. So there have definitely been times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. So, you know, in the beginning, you know, I don't know. I had something in my head, and maybe it was just like, I'm still here and Dan is not, right? And what an incredible gift to be able to be left, at least initially, you know, to keep NCCF going for some amount of time. But, you know, I would say kind of in the immediate years afterwards, like, I was also very lucky to have the benefit of Dan's broader network, particularly an organization, the Ullman Foundation, which is out of Baltimore, where, again, was a place that I found, you know, people I could connect to as, you know, somebody who had lost somebody to cancer. So, you know, I certainly took strength in that. You know, I think the other thing that people don't really realize was that Dan and I, you know, we didn't really know each other in, like, the span of what you know, how long have you and Amy been married now? Like
11 going on 12 years.
Yeah. So I got like a third of that, right?
Yep.
And so a lot of our relationship, you know, given we lived in Bethesda, like, I didn't really have relationships with you, as an example.
Sure.
I knew you, but we weren't friends like we are now. Same with Dan's family, who I also, I give them a great amount of so much love that they also allowed me to be so present for Dan, because I know that it could not have been easy to see their son and their brother going through what, you know, they did, and then choosing, you know, really relying solely on me as opposed to them. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that was the other thing is, you know, my friends and family were great. They didn't also know Dan very well.
Right.
So the relationships that I forged with Dan's family and with his myriad of friends and people that he worked with, we could all grieve together. So, you know, and the organization NCCF was also important for them. Mm-hmm. So I just always felt like I was the, you know, kind of conduit that could keep it going. I mean, it didn't hurt that I had, you know, a professional background, running foundation, you know, that I could leverage, you know. I mean, were there times? Yeah, I mean, there are definitely times where, I mean, it's tough, you know. I mean, we were talking the other night. I mean, there's, you know, just overall, I feel so blessed to be able to be in people's lives. But it is always bittersweet to watch his niece, be at graduation, just knowing like how badly he would, you know, have wanted to be there. But yeah, I mean, I think, listen, NCCF is always going to be Dan's thing, but it's also my thing and your thing. And I think, you know, you asked me why, like, I wouldn't have survived, you know, that situation without having something to really throw my shoulder against to make a positive outcome for, I mean, let's face it, like, as much as we loved it and we want to, like, he got dealt a shit hand. Like, he died at 27. I mean, you know, just totally not fair. Right. So, you know, to me, it's just an outlet to be able to continue to do something positive for somebody, you know, that I loved, that you loved. But I think also for me and you, you know, to be able to make something positive out of that situation for ourselves.
I think it's so remarkable, Meg, that you touched on that you and Dan just didn't have the opportunity to have that longevity of a relationship, right? Fast forward to 2024. What was it, last weekend? You were with the family for graduation.
Yeah,
and
great.
You know, both sides have, that is your family, you know?
Oh, for sure.
You know, and that's
my niece, my other niece on my side of the family, she's our social media intern now. So it's cool to see.
I love how you've all not only maintained, but became closer.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like, not to say that my friends and family were not great, but they just didn't know Dan like Dan's friends and family did. So, I mean, I find that to be truly remarkable. Like I said, it's a little odd to explain sometimes.
Sure.
Like, your brother-in-law is a coach, or your sister. How do you only have one brother? You know.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's usually more uncomfortable for them in the moment to, you know, hear the story. But yeah, I feel very lucky and blessed. I know a lot of people in my situation that, you know, had very difficult relationships, you know, in their broader family, you know, kind of dealing with these types of things. So.
And I think just selfishly, I know Dan would be just so happy. You know, you welcomed us last night. I'm here with my 4 children, my wife. The kids are running around.
I mean, he would love it.
I absolutely love it.
But these are moments for me where I'm like, oh shit, Dan should be here with his kids, with his friends. You know what I mean? Like, so while it's great for us to be here together, like, there's, you know, generally a little pang of like,
absolutely.
Oh, like, man, like, how unfair was that for him? Yeah.
No, I know we had some kind of candid talks, and we just had this like Pennsylvania bond, you know, and we were Pennsylvanians. We're both Geminis. He would come down. I lived at the beach for 2 different summers. He came down every single summer to hang out. And I think that's why, to come full circle, you know, so special. 20 years. Can you believe, like, 20 years later, you know, this is the 20th anniversary of the original golf tournament coming up. And Meg, when you think about the golf tournament, you know, what are some highlights for you just over the years, between the shots of Fireball and what stood out from you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the last tournament that Dan was able to attend before he passed away, which was still up in Royal Oaks.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so we made this long drive back to Bethesda, and
was it 3 hours for you?
I'm sure it's amazing we probably made it back. Although I don't know if Dan ever drank at his own golf tournament, but I certainly did. But anyways, we get home and like we just had, you know, stacks of money. We didn't have a credit card machine, so everybody was just paying cash.
Oh yeah.
And the two of us, I remember just sitting, you know, kind of counting the money that would have been donated, and I think it was like maybe that was the year we got up to like, close to 10,000. We were like, wow, like we'll be able to do 10 scholarships this year. Like that's so amazing.
You all would send the email out like at 3 a.m. and we'd wake up to see that.
Yeah. And then literally Dan looked at me. He's like, all right, we got to get the clippers. I was like, what? He's like, I'm shaving my head because he was going through chemo. So he literally was like, had waited to shave his head to go bald again until after the Waeger Cup. So that was that was honestly and ultimately ending up being a fun moment. I mean, but if you've ever attended a Waeger Cup, I think, I don't even think it's a 50-50 chance if it's going to rain. I think it's like a 70-30 that it's going to rain. So I don't know that they were the happiest of days, but I remember the first time, like, it was going to be spot on raining all day, hard dry. And I was like, nobody's going to show up. Nobody's going to show up. Like, just almost apoplectic, right? That, like, there wasn't going to be an event this year. But man, everybody showed up. They played in the rain, they were miserable. You guys were miserable.
We were there,
but
though.
nobody ever complained to me, And so I think, there's a lot of fun moments. I mean, I'm sure you can share yours after I, finish, but just the commitment for people coming back year in and year out. I mean, the vibe is so fun and,
great.
Different and, it's not like a corporate event. And so to me, every year is great because I get to see all of my old friends, I get to talk to people. A lot of times people will have within that year, dealt with their own experience with cancer. So to be able to see and, talk to them. But I mean, it is very unusual for an organization to last as long as ours has, particularly, in a memorial type sense of way.
Right.
Although I don't think I consider NCCF a memorial to Dan per se, but so it's just not lost on me how special and unique any opportunity is. We all get together, and then, I think not knowing if we could do it during COVID in 2020 and being terrified that like somebody was going to get, but the fact that we, that was actually one of the sunny years and we totally revamped the event and, we're able to do that. But I'm sure listening audience, Tom Marshall has one of the distinctions of being one of like, I think only now 4 or 5 people that have played in every single Waeger Cup. So he's, even the birth of his children,
we're there.
Yeah. Like he's swung by. So I'd love, especially from the early days, like what sticks out to you in terms of fun Waeger Cup memories?
I mean, the very first year, it was the Sunday after everyone graduated from homecoming, and it was turned back to clock night, and we woke up not knowing what time it was. This was before the phones automatically updated. And I think one of us had to call our parents to be like, what time is it? Because we have to drive 2.5 hours to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And it was just an hysterical moment because we just had no idea what time of day it was. And we all got in the car not knowing what Dan had planned. Dan was like, could you just come support me and the foundation? We were like, absolutely. And we got there and, mind you, Dan pulled this off in 6 months of diagnosis and had gifts for everybody and had a speech prepared and trophies. And it was absolutely amazing. And then many years we would rent Enterprise vans and load up 2 Enterprise vans and head up the road, and Lowie's in a gnome costume and Bert's in a Ricky Bobby costume going to the first hole. And, Joe proposed to Heather one year, which was really cool. And anymore, just seeing it's sad, right? That it's sometimes the only time of year we get to see everyone. Everyone's so busy and has their own things going on. But what stood out to me, and I know it means a heck of a lot to you, Meg, is just the generational piece to see Dan's nieces and nephews there, riding around the golf course, taking pictures. They're at the check-in, just so involved. It's truly inspiring. A lot of good memories.
Yeah, for sure. Now to see some of the kids playing in that, and but yeah, definitely shout out to Mike Capraletti, who with Dan, planned the first one. So I definitely want to give him a shout out because even though even though we were misbehaved and got kicked out of Royal Oaks in 2009, without Mike, there would not be a Waeger Cup. So,
And we should highlight the rest of the board members, Jason Lowy, and I know UBS matches every single year, and they're the title sponsor. Joe Meyer, Chris Persack, Autorant Meyer, Sergio, Pat Hayes. Missing anybody else?
No. Well, I think that's kind of the golf board. But I mean, certainly Dan's.
And then Dan's oh my goodness.
Dan's family, particularly, and his sister.
Yep.
Patrice is just a great fundraiser, and his sister Holly is a great organizer.
Yep.
And so they're really all the siblings.
Dan's dad with the donuts and
man.
It's a family affair, and it's just to see his nieces and nephews be part of it every year is special.
Yeah, and again, we're lucky over the years to have met some survivors. Our organization is national, so it's not very easy, to meet some of the award recipients, but we have in years past. So, Tim Wood, who comes and plays, is a scholarship recipient. Like I said, the Icing Lymphoma crew that, come still every year, even though they don't hold their own event. Yeah, I mean, it's just a really cool community and vibe. And I mean, I hate it. It's terrible, but I think at this point, everybody has been impacted by cancer in their life in some way, shape, or form. So I think it's especially meaningful. And although I keep telling you guys got to get together more often. You and I have been talking about that, as people grow up and have kids and move on in their careers. But I think Dan would be, one, irritated at that, but two, also very happy that that his friends still all come together, right? And that if there is only one time that they get to see each other, it's at Waeger Cup. So,
Meg, we touched on the board briefly and Dan's family and your involvement. One thing that stands out to me about this foundation is how much money has the board, yourself, Dan's family, taken personally over these 19 years?
Yeah, I mean, the National Collegiate Cancer Foundation is a labor of love. So there's no paid employees, aside from some minor administrative expenses.
Sure. Yep.
Every dollar we receive, we try to give back out. So, I mean, we'd love it to be more, but it's an all volunteer, organization. So no, and I don't know that anybody ever would take any money, to be honest with you, even if we grew it tenfold,
I think some memories back in the day was back slinging drinks in Federal Hill, and we used to have fundraisers at No Way Jose, and people would just hear the story and come out and just, we were all in our 20s at that point, probably didn't have two nickels to rub together, and people would just throw down $50, which at the time, or $100. And that's, you talk about Dan making feel people having a special effect on folks. If people gave $10, he'd make you feel like you donated $100,000. Any dollar helps, any dollar counts, and it goes back to these, young adults fighting cancer. Yeah,
I mean, every dollar we raise is in some way, shape, or form from part of our broader network of friends and family. So, we don't participate in grants or things like that. It's all, people, donating what they can. Yep. So, and helping wherever they can, right? In whatever way that they want.
Some of it's reading scholarships, some of it's
not for everybody. I mean, it's tough. But yeah, so I'm always just, I never really, look at what people don't do. I just am honored and wowed by what people are able to do. And we we would literally not be able to do this without a big group of people, not only contributing financially, but also, with their own time and their own way. So,
Meg, 20th year. I know we want to set the bar high and make this the best year yet. Where can people go on, website, and where could people go on the website to donate if they would like?
Yeah, and this is a mouthful, www.collegiatecancer.org. So if you look up collegiate cancer, you'll find it. But the donate tab there, right, and on the homepage. And I should also say, which is still up, People really want to read Dan's story in his own
Absolutely.
world. His blog is still up, which
Is it really?
yeah, the blog that we wrote, which
Oh.
is waegerwillwin.blogspot.com.
You guys blogged his
I know.
hospital visits and chemo and
Yeah, which
relationship.
back at that time was very unique, that we
Yeah.
kind of had this perspective of patient and caregiver that we did. But it's, you can just hear more about his story in his own words. And, I know everybody always talks lovingly about somebody, in their life, particularly if they've lost them. But yeah, I think it's pretty remarkable to be able to go back and read some of that stuff with, with him being gone 15 years now. So, but yeah, www.collegiatecancer.org.
Meg, when's the 20th golf tournament this year?
Yeah, come on out. Sunday, October 6th, 10 a.m. shotgun start at the Links of Gettysburg. So we'll probably have some fun things for the 20th. For sure, I will be, riding around with my backpack full of fireball shooters.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And I'm, seriously probably going through more alcohol known to man. But yeah, we would, we'd love to have anybody obviously come out and play or support, or, we're always also looking for auction and raffle items as well.
Yeah.
So, which you can email me directly as well.
You can put my parents down at the fireball station, AKA the putting contest.
Yes, yeah. It's a great time.
Great time.
I mean, nothing makes people donate more than a little bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
So, within reason.
That's right. That's right. Meg, 2 final questions here. What is one thing that you want to share about Dan or the foundation that will inspire others to go do more?
God, it's hard to pick just one, but
Or 2, whatever you want.
I think one of the things that helped us navigate in conversations that we would have during, some tough moments, which is one thing that is very easier said than done, but it's one that I, mentally try to stick with is, we would have these conversations, and Dan was always very astute in knowing that he knew what it was like to be a survivor, but he had no idea what it was like to be in my shoes. Which I was just the idea of you never assume. So like having conversations and asking people questions about what they're going through. But we always had this rule in the house that was like, hey, like we're going through some really crappy times, but we're not going to let it take up more than 20% of our day or mindset, right? Be it working on the foundation or thinking about cancer or, dealing with the health insurance stuff. So we had this, kind of, okay, 20% of the time, but 80%, like you just have to mentally force yourself to put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
And move forward and do something positive, get out of the house, do something different. So, as much as like he had that will win attitude, just the presence of self to know that in his partnership, he wasn't going to always have the answer, but also like, to make sure that there was a balance with what we were dealing with, in such a difficult time. And I think just, overall in life, which I think my friends know about know this about me, man, I'm a sentimental soul, like I love, my friends, if you go on a vacation with me, I'm going to make a video about it. Right. Like if there's a significant event in your life, like you're going to get a video from me about it. And I think a lot of that just stems from Dan and like, he just had a way of like, living life with joy and celebrating people. And so I still, when you go back and look at pictures, or you look at these old videos that I recently found, like he just lived life with a great amount of joy. And so again, I don't know that I always do that, successfully, but, the way that he lived his life, and to your point, you were talking, just made everybody feel appreciated and made everybody feel special, and celebrated very big moment. I mean, I can't even tell you the stuff that he would do for me was insane. I mean, it was a little over the top, but, I think that's, that is what, I take with me. And, we were talking about, it's like, it sometimes makes it difficult for me, or poignant for me. I wouldn't say difficult, in moments of watching, friends, special moments. I mean, I've married 3 of his friends, and the Reverend Rodgers, or being at these graduations, is that he would have just so much loved to have participated in those experiences, because it would have just brought him joy to see people in his life very happy. So,
speaking of graduation, I'll share this story. So leading up to graduation, they give you a week at McDaniel College to kind of celebrate and a whole bunch of events. Well, fast forward to actual graduation day. Dan did not pack a thing all week, nothing. And we woke up that morning. He has his shirt off, his cap on, his cords wrapped around him, and just singing and just loving life. And then after graduation, the school was ready to kind of check everyone out. Well, they came by, and Dan's family came back, and they were having cake and cards, and he's asking the people if they checking us out, like, do you want to come in for cake? They're like, no, we want you guys to go out. So he's opening up his gifts, right? And he got a camera. So they're taking photos, and then they wanted to go down to the arches. They came by like 3 or 4 times. And at first I was like, no, Dan, I don't want cake. Like, we got to get out of here. I was so invested to see like what was going to happen, because he did not care that they came by for 3 or 4 times. What he did care about was his family came there, and he was going to celebrate the crap out of his graduation. And I was like, this is amazing. And the school was like, I don't know how many times, I don't know. There's nobody else that we can check out on campus. Like, you guys have to go. He's like, we're going to go down and get pictures with my family. Like, I just graduated today. And he just had that spirit about him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anybody that knew him, he left a Dan-sized hole in this world, that's for sure.
Meg, last question, and I can't thank you enough for your time, and it's taken us, 15 years to sit down and do this, and it's been fun. Last question, bringing back the elevating the vibes and the tunes, and lots of artists and bands out there. And Meg, we've attended some concerts together. You might have some.
I think I still have some lingering injuries from the last one at OAR.
Oh, what a concert! It was amazing.
Which, by the way, Tom goes to this concert and then decides he's moving the next morning.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know how you did that. Honestly, I do not know how you did that.
Yeah. It was fun. I knew what I was getting myself into. But who you rocking with these days? Who's your favorite artist or band or that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm here for Taylor Swift. I don't know that I'm a Swiftie.
Okay.
But
sounds like you are.
I mean, like, she's a talented artist. So I like some of her new stuff. I'm very much here for Post Malone's country era.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I dig it.
I've seen him in concert, and he was great, the old stuff, but I love his new stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, always the past couple summers, my summertime Tedeschi Trucks Band, always rolls with a good vibe, and I think is fitting for the elevating.
Yeah, so vibe. Caught Up, one of my favorite songs. Yeah, great one. Well, Meg, I can't thank you enough for your friendship, just guidance, personally, professionally, over the years, and mentorship. And also for marrying my wife and I. Thank you so much for that.
I can't wait to next year on the top deck. We can renew the vows.
Renew the vows. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Meg. I can't thank you enough and love you.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. I love what you're doing with this. I mean, it's, I think you're going to be super successful. And thanks for all your friendship over the years. And I'm happy to sit here with you and happy to have the whole family down here with us. So
you might regret saying that
when I get pink eye from Riley.
Oh, well, that's a wrap from Bethany Beach. Stay tuned for another segment of Elevating the Vibes. Please follow Elevating the Vibes on Facebook and listen to the podcast on YouTube. If you have any comments or want to recommend someone to come on the show, please email me at elevatingthevibes@gmail.com. Again, elevatingthevibes@gmail.com. Enjoy the day, folks. Peace, love, and groove.